So I promised a video of like a juicy bee breath. And actually the breath in yoga is called Brahmari. And Brahmari is the breath of the bee or um, buzzing bee breath. And what you do for Brahmari, or what the effect of Brahmari is that you start to stimulate a marma point or a point in the mouth, which triggers through the pressure of that point and then through the sound of that point and the reverberation of the sound, the parasympathetic nervous system. So it slows the heart rate down, it slows the mind chatter down, and it focuses us so that we can maybe like go into sleep easier or deal with whatever stress is coming at us. Before we can go directly into Brahmari, however, we need to make sure that we cover like the fundamentals of the yogic breath. And from a yoga perspective, the breath is generally focused into the diaphragm. We want to make sure that we're breathing through the nose and not through the mouth. So as much as possible, we have the mouth closed, and then we're breathing in and out through the nose. And then we want to focus the breath in the lower half of the body into the diaphragm. And the breath, as it expands out, not just in the front of the body, but also in the back of the body. And it also needs to be deep, very even, and without a lot of noise or pause in it. So it's good to start out a practice or end a practice, maybe an anchoring into this breath, so that we can kind of start and end from a place of focus, and a place of depth and connection into our body. So in order to make the breath even, one thing that we can do is when we breathe in, we can count how many counts that in-breath is. So for instance, if I breathe in, I could count 1, 2, 3, 4. And if that's my count, then when I breathe out, I want to match that breath. So a way that we can make sure that we're breathing properly is to hold the one hand on the chest and then one hand on the belly. And so as we breathe in, we want to make sure we're focusing on that belly breath. So we're breathing in, and you can see as I breathe in that the breath is in the belly, it's not in the chest. So my chest is really not moving. And I'm going to breathe in that count. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can continue this on your own breath, whatever your count is. And just inhaling and exhaling for maybe like 4 or 5 breaths. So. Remembering to keep the breath quiet and smooth. Just feel the breath moving in all those places in the body, in the back, in the hips, and into the belly. make this our last breath. So inhaling and exhaling. Okay, and then you can just bring your hands down to your knees and notice what you feel. The one thing I did forget to mention is that when we're sitting in any sort of breath posture or in any meditation, we want to make sure that we have some sort of height underneath our sit bones. So having the main focus is to have the hips at a higher elevation than the knees, and this just provides us like more stability as we're sitting. You know, we can sit cross-legged. I generally sit this way because it is actually really stable for me. Some people, it's not as stable. There's a number of different ways you could sit, but you could just sit like regular cross-legged. You could sit like this. As long as the knees are lower than the hips, and then if your knee was popping up like mine sometimes does, like prop with a blanket underneath it so that it's supported. And then in this posture, I can really like get my legs into my feet into my legs in order to hold that stability. So, okay. So that's basic diaphragmatic breathing, and in that really is generally when you're doing any asana at all, any movement of the body, that's the breath you want to use. But the challenge sometimes is maintaining that if you're doing something that is causing like heavy respiration, like if you're doing like quick sun salutations or something like that. It's not that you can never open the mouth, but you want to make sure that you're breathing through the nose most of the time, and that you're focusing the breath there, that it's smooth and even and continuous. So for Brahmari, there is actually a mudra that is used, and a mudra in this case is a position of the hands. And so, I mean, it kind of seems like, I'm going to take my glasses off, but it kind of seems like maybe it's sort of a weird sort of set of hand motions. But the purpose of Brahmari, like I said, was to kind of like calm the mind, calm the body. And so when we do this, we want to make sure that we're closing off the senses, because the senses are what activates us and what triggers us to maybe be in more of the sympathetic nervous system versus the parasympathetic. So the major action of the mudra is on the ear, and so the tragus, which is the little like piece of the ear that is like right here, we want to make sure that the thumbs are pushed into that and into the ear, and almost in the action of closing off the ear, because the purpose or the reason for that is that it will allow the sound to like be focused inside the head, and it kind of like reverberates that sound that helps us to get into that parasympathetic state. So I will close off the tragus. If you want to do the full, you don't have to do anything more than that. Like that's really but the full mudra is the tragus, the index fingers at the third eye point, the second finger at the inside of the eye, inner point of the eye, the third finger at the edges of the nose, and then the fourth finger, the pinky fingers at the edges of the mouth. And so like you can kind of see like these are like points, these are marma points as well. And so these are points that like sort of inwardly focus the senses as we go through. And I'm already closing my eyes by doing this, because it's sort of almost getting myself into this position. It almost like triggers my mind that this is where I'm going, like I'm headed towards this. So within the mouth, the tongue is if you lift it up to the top of the roof of the mouth and then push the tongue forward, you can feel between the teeth, the top upper teeth and the gum line, just above the gum line is really where you want to place the tongue in order for Brahmari. And the way it has always been explained to me is that it's a barely audible hum, thus the buzzing bee. And so the tongue is actually like on that spot, but you're making almost like the sound of an N. So it's like like kind of like that. And so basically with the mouth closed and the mudra in place, and especially the tragus of the ear pushed in, you can just get into this breath and, start to make this noise and this reverberation into the head. And basically you make that sound, you breathe in a nice breath in the belly, and then you start the N, and then you breathe that, you make that sound like through the full breath as you're exhaling. And then when you inhale, you're not making the sound, you're just taking another inhale. And then as soon as you start exhaling again, you are, making the sound again. So I'll just demonstrate like how this goes, and just by doing a few rounds of it. So I'm taking a deep breath in the belly. So that's the basic breath. I can just feel just from 3 breaths, I feel so internalized and slower. Just a couple like pointers or refinements on that. Like sometimes, like what I notice is because of the mudra, sometimes my head is forward. And so I notice like if I'm in the mudra and I'm in the Brahmari breath, that if I straighten my neck and my head and like try to make sure that like my arms are relaxed, that I notice that the sound is more like it reverberates more inside my head. And from my perspective, like that is what you want, because that will allow you to like relax in and tune into the vibrations of the breath even more deeply than if you were not. And then the other thing you can do is to play a little bit with the tragus as far as like how tightly you have it pushed in or how much you have it like sort of just like rest your thumbs resting on the tragus, so that again you can like make sure that you get the benefit of the breath reverberating as much as possible. And I would recommend, like, from the number of times you would do Brahmari, like we would call that a round, like an inhale and an exhale is a round. I would say initially to start, I would start with like maybe 7. And then over the course of like a week, you could build up like by like a round or 2 every day. There's a thought that like the number 11 is like a sacred number, so you could maybe work up to 11, or for whatever reason I do 12 sometimes before bed, and then I actually have a friend who does 20 before bed. So you can once you practice with it, once you're established with your diaphragmatic breathing, I think having a diaphragmatic breath practice is a really good idea. So having getting that established, making sure that you're focused on your breath and your diaphragm as you're doing your asana, and then just at any time, because that's the place that you're going to stimulate the vagus nerve and again stimulate like the parasympathetic nervous system to relax the body. um, I think especially right now, like there's so much stress that's going on just externally from everything that's happening in the world and in our lives, that it is very helpful to focus on that type of breath. So diaphragmatic breath, smooth, deep, even, continuous, without sound, without pause, in and out. That breath is really important. And then you can kind of, um, you know, play with Brahmari in the places where it makes sense, where you need it in times of maybe more extreme stress. So that's it. Thanks for listening and good luck with the juicy bee breath.